Bert is going to read us the story of Purim, and then afterwards I'm giving the short teaching. Oh, beautiful.
All right. So grab a seat, everyone. Grab a seat after they've taken your photo. All right, grab a seat. All right. So
all photos time at the best.
yes, I know. I see photos. It's a great time to take photos.
Sorry, I'm in the way.
All right.
It looks okay.
You see, sorry,
Have a seat. Come and grab a seat. If there's not enough seats, we'll grab some extra chairs.
Who's this?
Or pull a seat. So here's the little background, or some for those of you who have never been to a Purim spiel. Are we going to do this with play actors? No. Okay.
Beautiful.
So sad.
Read it for our
You just have
imagination.
to do a great storytelling voice.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll have to do a storytelling voice. Once upon a time, in a land far, far away. But before I tell this story,
People will pick it up.
before I get started, I need to tell you something. Whenever you hear the name of the villain in this story, it is customary to drown out that name. I didn't say his name! We'll practice. We're ready? You ready?
Yeah.
No, we're gonna practice. So, it's only when I say Haman. Wait. But when I say
Camera's wobbling.
Hadassah or Esther or Mordecai. Okay, all right. We'll try and make this fun.
That is already.
I know we don't normally make this much noise. Well, maybe we do. All right. The basic Purim story. It all began in the ancient Persia 3 years after King Ahasuerus ascended to the Persian throne. When he felt secure in his new position, he celebrated by throwing a 180-day-long feast for all of his subjects. Following this extravagant celebration, the king hosted a smaller, week-long party for the residents of his capital city of Shushan. In the women's quarter of the palace, Ahasuerus' wife, Queen Vashti, hosted her own party for the Shushanite for the women of Shushan. On the 7th day of his party, the king's heart was merry with wine. And he commanded that his wife, Vashti, appear before all of the partying men. He wanted to show them all her exquisite beauty. But Vashti refused the request.
Trouble.
And at the advice of his advisors, the king ordered that Vashti be banished from his presence forever, and that her royal status be given to another. Now, when the king's wrath had dissipated, he was lonely for a wife. His servants suggested that he orchestrate a beauty pageant. Officers would be appointed in all of the king's lands, and all of the beautiful girls would be brought to him. When Esther appeared before the king, he immediately liked her, and Esther became the new queen of Persia. But as her cousin Mordecai's director, Esther did not tell that she was Jewish, not even to the king. Shortly after Esther became queen, Mordecai overheard two of the king's door guards discussing a plot to assassinate the king. Mordecai had them reported, and the traitors were hanged. Meanwhile, Haman, one of the king's ministers, was promoted to the position of prime minister. Haman was a virulent Jew hater. In fact, he was a descendant of the notoriously anti-Semitic nation of Amalek. Immediately after his promotion, the king issued a decree ordering everyone to bow down whenever Haman appeared. When Mordecai refused to bow down, Haman was infuriated. He resolved to take revenge against all of the Jews, and they threw lots to determine the lucky day when he would implement his plan. The lot fell on the 13th day of the Hebrew month of Adar. Haman approached the king and offered him 10,000 silver talents in exchange for permission to eliminate the Jews. The king told Haman, "The money is yours to keep, and the nation is yours to do with as you please." Haman immediately sent proclamations to all of the kingdom. These declarations, sealed with the royal signet ring, ordered the people to rise up against the Jews and kill them all, men, women, and children, on the following 13th of Adar. Mordecai became aware of the decree. He tore his garments and put on sackcloth. He sent a message to Esther, asking her to approach the king and beg him to spare her people. Esther responded that according to the rules, anyone who entered the king's presence unsummoned would be put to death, unless the king extended to that person his golden scepter. And I, Esther said, have not been summoned by the king for 30 days already. Mordecai sent another message. Do not think that you will escape the fate of all the Jews by being in the king's palace. For if you will remain silent at this time, relief and salvation will come to the Jews from another source, and you and your father's house will be lost. And who knows if it is not for just such a time that you reached this royal position. Esther agreed to approach the king, but asked Mordecai to gather all of the Jews in Shushan and let them fast and pray for 3 days and 3 nights. After 3 days of fasting, Esther put on her best clothes and perfume and went before the king. Immediately, the king extended his scepter. "What is it?" the king asked. "What is your request?" "I would like to invite the king and Haman to a small feast that I have prepared," Esther responded. So the king and Haman joined Esther for a wine feast. And during the feast, the king again asked Esther, "Why did you invite me here? What is your real request?" And Esther responded, "I would appreciate if tomorrow again the king and Haman would join me for another feast, and then I will tell my request to the king." Haman left the party a happy and proud man. Oh, the honor that he was being accorded. But standing at the king's gate was Mordecai, who still refused to bow down to Haman. And Haman enraged. When he arrived home, he decided to erect a gallows and then go to the king and request permission to hang Mordecai. But no. I know that one doesn't quite work, but all right. You know, that night, sleep eluded the king. So he asked his servants to come read his sermons. So he asked his servants to come read to him from the royal chronicles. They complied with the king's orders, and they read from the chronicles how Mordecai had saved the king's life when the two guards had hatched a plot to kill him. Was he rewarded for this fine act? The king asked. No, he was not, the servants responded. At that moment, Haman entered the king's court to ask the king permission to hang Mordecai. But before Haman could utter a word, the king addressed him. My Haman, in your estimation, what shall be done for a person whom the king wishes to honor? Haman was certain that the king wished to honor him, so he responded, bring the royal garments and the royal horse, and let one of the king's nobles dress the man, and lead him on the horse through the city streets, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for one who honors the king. Great idea, says the king. Now go get my garments and my horse and do so for Mordecai, the Jew. Haman had no choice but to comply. On the next day, he went and honored Mordecai as the king had ordered. Then immediately rushed to join the king and Esther for the second feast. What is your request? The curious King Ahasuerus asked Esther at the feast. If I have found favor in your eyes, Esther pleaded, and if it pleases the king, let my life be granted to me as my plea, and the life of my people as my request. For my people have been sold to be annihilated, killed, and destroyed. Esther then pointed at Haman and said, this is the evil person who wishes to do this. The king was greatly enraged when he was informed that Haman had built a gallows for Mordecai. He ordered that Haman be hanged on that very gallows. On that day, Haman's estate was given to Esther, and Mordecai became the new prime minister in Haman's stead. Then, with the king's backing, Mordecai wrote a decree that granted the Jews permission to defend themselves against their enemies. Mordecai and Esther established a holiday to commemorate these amazing events. Jews worldwide celebrate on the 14th of Adar, while residents in walled cities like Shushan celebrate on the 15th of Adar. This holiday, called Purim, is the most joyous holiday of the Jewish calendar. All right, so I want to invite a special guest speaker, my lovely wife. She is actually going to present and teach on the Feast of Purim.
Now, Purim is Hebrew for lots. So Pur is lot, Purim is lots. And so there's actually a play on words in a way when you have Yom Kippur, because Pur this lot, and they would draw the lot for which goat would go to the Lord and which one would be the Azel sent out. And so it's like Kippur, a day like Purim in a way. There's just interesting study on that. Anyway, I'm going to be talking. Yes, can I actually sit down though?
Okay, I'll come over.
My heels are killing me.
Take them off.
Okay, I'll turn it off. Sorry, don't hurt your ears.
Eli, is this on?
No, it's on, it's okay.
It is on.
I thought you said off.
Hold
I'm gonna hold it, and I can actually eat the mic. Then you don't have to tell me I can't hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, so Robert and I put together a PowerPoint, and so we'll give you a little bit of history and study about the Feast of Purim. I'll try and keep it short. So go ahead. So it all starts with Amalek, and so when the children of Israel were coming out of Egypt for the Exodus, there's the Amalekites that came up from the rear and attacked them. And so we see that Amalek is actually the grandson of Esau. So you see this family thing, like Jacob and Esau, they didn't get along. And so here's Esau's descendants then attacking the children of Israel. Now, the Lord, he portioned out their lands. You had Midian and the Edomites and the different countries around Egypt, around Israel, that the Lord said, don't attack them. They only attack the Canaanites. I said that was their portion. So they weren't even going to mess with the Amalekites. But Amalek attacked them. So you see Esau, nation of Edom, he married a Canaanite woman and had Eliphaz, which means God of gold. And then he married a woman from the people of Seir, and her name was Timnah, and then they had Amalek, from which you get the Amalekites. Okay, slide. So we're going to talk about what Amalek embodies, like what's its motive, what does it do. So we see that they attack without warning, and from the rear, so sneaky, sly. I guess it's because it's behind me. Yeah. Okay, so they attack the stragglers, the weary, the women, the children, those who are vulnerable. The battle is also spiritual and physical. So while Joshua is fighting the Amalekites, you have Moses holding his staff up, and every time his arms came down from being tired, Amalek would prevail. And whenever he raised them up, Israel would prevail. And so then there was Aaron and Hur who helped keep Moses' hands up so that way that Israel would prevail and win the battle. So it's spiritual. And we'll see other instances where fighting against Amalek, you need to pray. It's a spiritual battle. You won't win it in the natural. Okay. So, hold on. Did I cover all that? Okay. Says Israel's lack of trust in the Lord opened the door for the attack. They were grumbling, they were complaining in the wilderness. And so that can open us up to the enemy. And afterwards, the Lord swears that he will have war with Amalek for generation to generation. He even tells Moses, as the children of Israel are going into the land in Deuteronomy, blot out Amalek. Do not forget. And so we'll see what happens when you don't listen to the Lord, when you forget what he tells you to do. And so Yeshua will be the ultimate fulfillment of this when he destroys the enemies of Israel, the people who have this spiritual, ungodly hatred, anti-Semitic hatred of the Jewish people, and want to, they say, from the river to the sea, they want to wipe them out. So the Lord will come and save his people. Yep, next. All right, so now we have King Saul. And so the kings are supposed to be a picture of Messiah. Okay, so King Saul, even though his name means asked for, because the people asked for him, he was from the tribe of Benjamin. Benjamin means son of my right hand. And so, in a way, we see how, Yeshua the Messiah is the son of the right hand of the Father. So he is the king. He's supposed to be a picture of the Messiah, though it comes through David later. And the Lord told him to annihilate Amalek, to kill male, female, children, animals, everything. It was the total ban and burn, like they did with Jericho and Ai and other cities that Joshua did during the conquest. Saul did not fully comply. He saved the king and saved some of the sheep. And so the prophet Samuel says, you were supposed to destroy them all. Well, I did what the Lord wanted me to do. No, why do I hear bleeding, of the sheep? And so because of that, you have King Agag of the Amalekites. So King Agag ends up being the ancestor of Haman, who is the Agagite. Yes. So Haman the Agagite is a descendant of King Agag, who is an Amalekite. And we still see that Saul didn't kill all the Amalekites, because then later, King David, he wasn't king then yet, but he was already anointed, and he was in the wilderness. He would destroy different villages of the Amalekites, but pretending that he was attacking Israelite villages when he was pretending he was on the Philistine side. Anyway, while he was doing battle against them, the Amalekites came to Ziklag. And remember, he took all the Amalekites took David's wives and children, and the other men's wives and children, and all their belongings. And the men almost wanted to kill David. And so what David did, he prayed. He prayed, should I go? Will you give me victory? And he prayed. The Lord told him to listen for a sound in the bush. And he went forward, and they captured everything back. So we see that he prayed, and then he went into battle. And also, when you see how King Saul died, you know how it says that he fell on his sword? But then also later in 2 Samuel, which is written by the same author, you see an Amalekite come to King David and say, I saw him, and King Saul, and he
Beat me to kill him.
yeah, he was dying, and they asked me to finish him off, And David was like, you killed the Lord's anointed? So here this Amalekite's thinking he's going to be rewarded, and it was like, oh, off with his head, he's dead. So you see this divine reversal, where here Saul was supposed to kill the Amalekites, and in the end he gets killed by an Amalekite. So, yeah. Well, claim to, but he could have.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. Okay, so now we have Esther and Haman. So now we have the motives of Haman here. You see a brazen denial of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So he had his own religion, his own nationality. You have the legacy of Esau's hatred of Jacob. You see how he's going to stealthily, sneakily attack them by making a decree with the king. So it just happened overnight. You see that there's a death warrant for you and your family, and only because you're Jewish. So he vilifies the Jews. He lies about the Jews. They're different people. They have different laws and customs. I mean, you see the same thing where, you know, because they keep the commandments, they stand out, and oh, they're different people. Anyways, he bribes the king to then be able to do what he wants to do with them. And he seeks to annihilate them completely. So we see this spirit even today.
C'est den Hitler.
Yeah. I saw it during the Holocaust. I even read recently about Joseph Stalin, how he wanted to eradicate all the Jews in Russia, but then died just a few days before Purim. And so it didn't happen, what he was about to do. So look that up. We'll do the next one. So Esther is like David. She prays, she fasts, and she puts her life at risk to save her people by going before the king. And the Jews still needed to defend themselves because even though the king gave the decree for the peoples of the different provinces to kill the Jewish people, and he couldn't undo that. It was one of those things with the laws of the Persians that even the king was subject to the law. So he couldn't reverse it, but he was able to say that the Jewish people could defend themselves. And I think they were given 2 days that they could do so. And also, Messiah would not have been born if this hadn't have happened, because we forget that Persia ruled from India all the way down to Ethiopia. Okay, so that includes Israel, and so Messiah wouldn't have been born. So this helped. So it's the enemy, when he sees that the Messiah is coming, he tries to block them out. He tries to stop it. The enemy's trying to do it today with Messiah. He's trying to get him not to come again. Okay, but God brings a divine reversal, and so here, what Haman intended to do to Mordecai happened to him. Haman built a gallows for Mordecai, but Haman got hung on it instead. And the Jews were intended to be annihilated, but instead they were victorious. So we see this very strongly with the Third Reich. And so Hitler definitely had that spirit of Amalek. He created God in his own image, and he definitely created his own religion and stuff there. Don't ever believe that he was a Christian. He was not. Tore Bibles in half, got rid of the Old Testament, took scissors to the New Testament, made it say what he wanted to say. True believers were put into camps as well. So he demonized the Jews through lies and propaganda. He confiscated their property, and he targeted the old, the weak, the children. 1 million children alone died. Now, there's something interesting that if you see the Esther scroll, it's called the Megillah, HaMegillah. It's the only scroll that is actually decorated, because God's name is not mentioned in the book of Esther. He's hidden, though he's there. And so it's one scroll that they will decorate, because you were not afraid of the artist actually trying to depict God in the scroll. So it's decorated beautifully. And in the back, I don't know if I have a picture. Okay. So you have Haman's sons listed there in a column, and they were hung as well. And then you have ve'et, which is and then the definite direct object marker. But maybe we can go back. It talks about a possible another 10 sons of Haman, like prophetic wise. And Someone want to read Esther 9, 7 through 10? I didn't have that printed out, sorry. Anyways, in some of the names of Haman's sons, there are tiny letters in Hebrew. So you'll see this big font and then a tiny little letter within it. And Hebrew letters can also be numbers. And so it came up with 3 numbers. And it actually corresponded to the Hebrew year. During the Nuremberg trials, that was the Hebrew year. They just didn't have the millennial. But it ended up being that year. And even Joseph Streicher, who was a propagandist for the Nazis, when he was being hung, he said something strange. He said, Purim Fest, 1946. And it's like, okay. But they had this sick fascination. Yeah. So did someone find Esther?
Yeah, what do you want?
Okay. 7 through 10. Go ahead and read. Yeah, do you want to do the mic?
Full of names.
Also, Parshandatha, Dalphon, Espatha, Poratha,
Okay, so the
Adalia.
names, yeah.
Is that the one you want?
Yeah, all their names, yeah.
Aradatha, Parmashta, Arasai, Aradai, and Barjesatha, the 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hamadatha, the enemy of the Jews, they killed.
Okay, and verse 13.
I'm getting there. Then Esther said, if it pleases the king, let it be granted to the Jews who are in Shushan to do again tomorrow, according to today's decree, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged on the gallows.
There we go. So it says they were hung, and it says may they be hung tomorrow.
Pardon the...
But
pronunciation.
hanging back then was actually, they say it could have been impalement. And so it was a demonstration, you know, kind of like London Bridge, and a deterrent. So, yeah, so there's this kind of a hint that it could be 10 more sons. So that's what we're talking about. I just got ahead of myself. So Julius Streicher said Purim Fest, 1946. So Esther received her request of 10 more sons of Haman. And so, yeah, exactly 10 were hung. 11 of them were tried. 1 committed suicide the night before, and then those ones were hung. So, modern day Amalekites. They seek to annihilate the Jews. They have no problem killing old women or children. They deny the supremacy of the God of Israel. They bitterly hate the Jewish people. They stealthily attack rear ranks or terror tunnels. And they try and bribe the king or the world to turn a blind eye and to simply be complacent. Next one. Is that it? We see in Psalm 83 all the nations, including Amalek. So these are the nations when the Lord comes and saves his people and judges these nations. So you can see all around there, you have Tyre, Philistia, Amalek, Edom, Ishmaelites, Moab, Ammon, Hagarites, Gebal. And their purpose that you read in Psalm 83 is to destroy the nation of Israel, which they tried to do in 1948 during the Arab-Israeli War, and in 1967 with the Six-Day War. And they're not going to stop. So we need to pray for peace, only the Prince of Peace. And so I really love what One for Israel is doing, because they're not only sharing the gospel to the Jewish people in Israel, they're now broadcasting to the West Bank and to the Gaza Strip, and they're reaching the Arabs as well, because that is the only way there's going to be peace, the Prince of Peace. Next one. Okay, so in Psalm 83 and in Judges, you have the Psalm of Asaph, and he asks the Lord to defeat the nations like the Midianites, which you read about with Deborah and Barak. And it mentions this thing about make their leaders like Oreb and Zabib, which refers to Gideon. And it mentions these crescent ornaments, these moons. And Asaph prays that the enemy would be either put to shame and that they may seek your name. That means come to know the Lord Yeshua. Or if they won't, that they would be put to shame and perish, that they'd be stopped. So, yeah, we need to be praying that they would seek the Lord, though. And it's just interesting. Here it talks about the camels plucking the crescents from the camels' necks. So it's just kind of just like, even today, very, very interesting. Okay. And so the ultimate destruction of Amalek is through Yeshua, our Messiah. And there'll be 2 banquets when Yeshua returns as well. We want to be part of the first one, the wedding feast of the Lamb. The second one is for the birds of the air to devour the enemies. So, yeah. Yeshua is coming soon, and we need to be ready. We need to share the gospel with everyone. Jew first, but then also the Arabs, everyone. This is a time where, like, not everyone can just go to the Middle East. They're coming to us. They're coming to us. And so, like, some people are afraid with, the caravans and how they were leaving Syria and different stuff like that. This is an opportunity. I mean, yes, we need to be thinking about safety as a nation and stuff, but then this is where the Christian community should be like, gospel, gospel, gospel. Because if we don't, then what we fear will come upon us. So, all right. Anything else there? That's it. So, thank you. And, Andre, you want to help me with this? Yeah. He's trying to get out of it. Mom, could you? Yeah, sorry. Robert turns 40 tomorrow. We would like to pray over him, and then we'll bring out the cake, which is another reason why we waited for dessert at the end.
I thought there would be many people wanting to pray for Robert, but I think we need to clear those red chairs at the back and move towards the back, and you can lay hands on him and you can pray for him. Can you not hear? I said I think we should move those red chairs at the back out of the way so that they can be space there, like when we're dancing, and Robert can go and stand in the center. We can pray for him and we can lay hands on him. Everybody at the tables, can you join us if you want to come? If you want to come, please come and join us. Thank you.